Okay, we have emerged from our darkened room and we now need to address a new requirement. The end user wants to be able to click on a bar in the chart and display a list view of the invoices that make up the totals in the bar. Something like this. So we can see that they should be able to click on one of these bars and we'll have a list view popping up here. So we've got a number of things to think about. How do we catch the chart event? Is there a chart event that we can catch? And if there is, then what is the event ID that equates to a click event on the bar? And what data does it pass back to us? We know we can display a dialog box because we've done that in the help already, but we have no experience with the list view. So how on earth does that work? Now, there is a very good sample called SAM-DTA, which shows different ways of getting data into a list view. So that's worth you having a look at. There's also a very good detailed description of how the list view works in the guide. But I've taken some of the key points out of the guide so we can just discuss at this point. The list view is populated by data from an XML string. That XML string has to be well formed and it should have a root node. And then the rows in a list view equate to a repeating element node in your XML. The list view actually refers to this as its primary node because that's the node it's looking for to reflect each individual line in a list view. And then the data for each of the columns in the list view is actually the element within that repeating node. And then what actually happens is when the XML is presented to the list view, Syspro matches up the element names with the column headings and it populates it all automatically for you. So let's have a quick look at this. Here's an example of some XML. Here is our root node here. The invoice detail element is the repeating element that equates to a line, in which case we know it as a primary node here. And then the data for each of the columns is in here. Now, a couple of things. You can have more data than there are columns. Syspro will just simply ignore the extra data. And you can actually have different column headings. See this here, customer PO has spaces here, but the element name has no spaces. You can have different column headings from the element name, and we'll see how that works as we go along. So that's basically the relatively straightforward. And again, once again, Syspro and the app designer is doing the large amount of the lifting for you. So next step now is to go and have a look and see if we can trap these chart events and see what parameters we're getting back. Okay, the next thing we need to do is start building our list view, but we have a bit of a problem. Where are we going to get the data from? Well, if you remember from our earlier sections, the scripting dictionaries we used to build the chart were carrying the XML strings of all the invoices that went into those totals. So we know that if we nip into our script here, and then we can look at how we built our chart, which was build chart data. If we scroll down here a short way, here, we can see that this is the structure of the data that we're keeping. So we can now see the element names that need to be matched either to the column headings or the XML binding, which we'll see in a short while. So now that we know that the names of what we've got to do with a list view, we can nip back here. We can add our list view. Here it is, it's popped up here, and over on the right hand side we've now got our pane information here. We've got and another tab for managing the list view columns. Just as an aside, remember that we have our application explorer. Let's just see what it's been up to whilst we've been tinkering away. Can you see all the panes and the controls that we've got here, and then obviously our toolbars and everything like that. So it's actually, again, quite useful to be able to navigate to that. Right, so we've got our list view here, and first things we'll do is change the title. Now, invoices, it is going to be a dialog pane because we actually want it to come up. And there's a variety of properties here. Now, the key thing about a list view, obviously, is that you've got to tell it where it's going to get its data from. This is what we call binding. So at the moment, right at the bottom here, there's something called bind properties. And in here, it will tell you or give you options of how you're going to bind it. By default, it's set to none. And therefore, if you try to add a column to the list view, you could do, but you wouldn't be able to bind it to any data because it doesn't know what to look at. So we can either bind to a standard Syspro business object, which is fine, but we've actually, the data that we're carrying isn't from a business object. We've created it ourselves, so we will select that. And we need to also tell it what the primary node is. You remember the repeating element we're talking about? Well, in our sample, this was called invoice detail. Now, it's absolutely important. This is all case sensitive. If you typed in invoice detail in lowercase and it's in camel case like this, then they won't match and your list view will not populate. So if you get behavior where either the list view doesn't populate or a column doesn't populate, it's invariably spelling mistake on the case. Okay, so we've now got our list view here. We've bound it to an external data source. We've told it what the repeating row is. So the next thing to do is actually add a column. Add the column, please. So it's asking us for a caption. So here we will type an invoice. Okay. So it's invoice, it's going to be alpha. And now it's sitting here saying, right, well, I know the caption's invoice, but what's the element name of in your XML? And as it happens, in this case, it is invoice. Okay. Okay, so now that we've added that invoice, you can see it coming here. A little bit difficult to read. So what I'm going to do is drag this out here. We'll just stretch it a bit and oops. There we go. And we can see that we've got our first column here. So if we go to list view columns, we want to add another column and we will call this invoice date. Okay. See, it's added it straight away, and it's basically saying what's the name of the element that you're binding to. It is invoice date. Oops. But obviously with no space in it. So that's sorted out. We want to add balance. Balance is going to be numeric, so we might as well do that. And then in here, this was called invoice bal. We want to add another column, which is the original amount. Okay, and that's going to be numeric as well. That was called original amount. To go back to invoice date, we should change the data type to date. Okay, so that's looking quite good. So we've got our invoice date, balance, and everything like that. What I'll do is just park this up here out of the way so we can see. So we've got our list view sorted with its columns. We think we've got our binding correct. What we need to do now is go back to the VB script and start to get the data. Okay, so we've now got our list view sorted out. We've expecting it to be bound to the data, but the question now is, where is the actual data? Now we do have a bit of a problem because the scripting dictionary that we use to populate the chart in the first place isn't a variable which persists through the run of the code, and you can't save it either in the Syspro global variables or using the set variables call out, because Syspro and its programming languages wouldn't understand what a scripting dictionary was. Fortunately, because of the way that Syspro works, once we've called the business object ARSQRY once, the second call to it is really lightning fast. So the simplest way of achieving this is just simply to query for the data again. Now, one thing we have to bear in mind is that when we first started the program, we keyed in the customer number, the toolbar event fired, we took it from parameter 1 and we did a load of things. Now the chart event is firing, the first job we actually have to do is go and get the customer number. So I've got a variable called customer number here, and we will go to the toolbar, callouts, and down here there will be get value, and it's on there. So basically what it's saying is I want you to get the value. Now obviously when you double click here, just beware that it actually puts the variable in as well. I keyed that in first, and we don't want 38,000 because that is the it's not readable really. So if you remember, we had this variable up here that we were going to use. Okay, so basically what that's saying is, please go to the toolbar and pick up the customer number from the combo box. It's as simple as that. Okay, so we've got a little bit more work to do. We need to go and get, I'm just going to paste a bit of code in here. We need to go and get the customer data. So we take the customer number and we go and get, which we've already done. So we know that works. We're going to take the XML out and build the chart data. We know that works. Now at this point, we're now picking up the parameter 2, which is the point. It's the chart point. And I'm just making sure I've got a 2-character chart point, which will match the 2-character index on the graph. And then I'm taking that and passing the scripted dictionary and the point to a function called find invoices, and it will return to me the XML string. I just want to nip down to the find invoices function. It's a very, very simple one. It basically says, please go and look for the point in the graph scripting dictionary. And when you found it, will you then go and look for an item in it called point data, which of course is the XML string, and it just returned it to us. So that's relatively straightforward. So we'll just nip back up here. So now we should have our XML string. We just need to tell Syspro the app designer what to do with it. So we need to come to list view callouts, and I'm going to use this one, list view clear. So it'll clear the list view first and then add the records. And you can see it's taking the XML string there. And then one thing I often forget is, having populated the list view, we still need to show, the dialog. So here we go, and see there now it knows we've got 2 dialogues. And hopefully, if we've got everything right, that will show us our list view. So we will close that. And then we'll open it again. We'll run it. Key our number in. Which is good. Click on here. And hey presto. There we have it. So you see actually relatively easily in a few lines of code, the app designer has done all the work for you. And hopefully, if you take this along with the spec to our end user, he will have learned his lesson anyway and won't ask for any more features, and it does what he actually wants. And that's great. Thanks very much.